within a lie. They question what is presented as inevitable. They challenge what is declared to be unquestionable. They align their actions with their convictions, often at great personal costs. It is thus our sincere hope that the world still has these people who live within a truth. As we gather here today, we ought to understand that preserving human rights and constitutional responsibilities is a reality we all need. This reality is neither abstract nor is it distant from where we are today. With those words, colleagues, I welcome you all to the Faculty of Law at the University of Fort Hare. We hope that you're going to enjoy the conversations which are going to be held today, as well as the keynote address from our Reverend Nissen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Njotini, for those thought-provoking, welcoming remarks. I would now like to call upon Dr. Carter from the South African Human Rights Commission to give us the purpose of today's guest lecture.
Thank you so much, Program Director, Prof. Njotini, faculty, students, and Chairperson Chris Nissen for joining us here in Kugompu at Fort Hare for this very important, and I'm going to say annual lecture because we've institutionalized it, informally so. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you about the address and the purpose about the address and why we are here again speaking to you about what is so important for us, especially in the month of March. And when we come to Fort Hare, I always like to challenge you. We never leave here, satisfied because we have a hunger for more. We have a hunger for answers, we have a hunger for participation, and we really need to ignite the thinking amongst ourselves here in this room today. So I'm going to pose a few questions to you. I'm going to be a little bit controversial before I'm going to introduce my chairperson to you. So bear with me, colleagues. Children in the Eastern Cape are dying of hunger. Not because there's no right to food in the Constitution, not because nobody knows about it, not because we lack the words. They are dying because somewhere between the right being written down and the child being fed, responsibility is lost. So that is why I wanted to talk to you about this just in terms of a purpose for today. I want to start by saying something that might, again, feel a little bit uncomfortable in the room, because we're in a room full of people who study, who teach, and who champion human rights. Perhaps we have too many human rights conversations and not enough conversations on responsibilities. South Africa has one of the most progressive, most celebrated, most quoted constitutions on the face of this earth. We have Chapter 2. We have the Constitutional Court. We have the Human Rights Commission. We have academic departments, NGOs, civil society organizations, international partners, all of us dedicated to the rights. And yet, a child in Ngobo dies because a school feeding scheme may not have been administered. A woman in Mthatha is turned away from a clinic because there was no medication. An elderly person in Komani hasn't received his grant in 3 months because the system is down. A baby in Kotimfaba is admitted to hospital, malnourished, not sick, but hungry. In 2026. These are not, unfortunately, colleagues, hypotheticals. These are cases that reflect those coming across my desk, reflect the inbox of our chairperson here today. These are real people with real names whose rights are perfectly intact on paper, and completely violated in reality. So I want to ask the uncomfortable question. If these rights exist, where's the failure? The failure today, as introducing the topic of today, I want to argue, is a crisis of responsibility. And I don't mean that as a political statement. I mean it as a structural one. What I have learned sitting in this province, running inquiries, receiving complaints, engaging communities, is that the greatest threat to human rights in South Africa right now is not a government that doesn't know about rights. It is a culture in which everyone assumes responsibility belongs to someone else. The municipality says that it's a provincial matter. The province says that it's a national competency. The department says we are waiting for the budget. The budget says we're waiting for policy. The policy says we're waiting for implementation. And the child waits. And waits. And may die. Now, I'm standing here at your university today, at Fort Hare, and I don't take that lightly. The institution is not just a university, it is a site of moral reckoning, one that our chairperson here is very familiar with. Nelson Mandela sat in these lecture halls. Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, Desmond Tutu. They didn't just come here to get degrees. They came here and they left here with a sense of personal obligation to history. They understood something that I think we have slowly, quietly, and perhaps dangerously forgotten, that knowledge without responsibility is sometimes a privilege that us all we carry. It's just a privilege with a certificate, perhaps. And that brings me to you here, sitting here with us today. If you look around the room, you are the ones that have access to further education. You are the ones that know the Constitution, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A today. You are the ones who understand rights frameworks, who can argue Section 27 in your sleep, perhaps even. You are statistically among the most informed young people in our country. And that means something. It means something very specific. It means that when you leave this institution, when you go into law, into government, into business, into academia, into civil society, you will have power over other people's rights. You will be the municipal manager who decides whether the water project gets prioritized. You will be the magistrate who decides how seriously to take a protection order. You will be the HR director who decides whether a pregnant employee gets to keep her job. You will be the doctor who decides how much time to spend with a patient who can't speak English. You will be the parliamentarian, and you will, who decides whether to show up for the vote. And in every single one of those moments, someone's right will depend entirely upon your sense of responsibility. Not the Constitution, not the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, not mine, yours. So let me be direct with you today. I want to be a little bit controversial. The way I wish someone had been direct with me earlier in my career. Responsibility is not comfortable, unfortunately. It is not a concept for lecture halls. It is not something you perform at conferences where we so often appear on panels and then set aside when hard decisions are to be made. Responsibility is what you do when you leave here. After you've listened to Chairperson Nissen, having flown down here to speak to you today. It is what you do when the system makes it easy to look away and you choose not to. So it is the official who flags the irregularities, the practical people at the end of the day, the researcher who publishes the findings, even though the findings may embarrass someone. Now, the Human Rights Commission exists because rights need protection, right? Rights need protection. But I want to tell you something that we sometimes don't say loudly enough. With the amount of complaints that the Human Rights Commission need to deal with, I sometimes wish we did not need to be as big as we still have to grow in order to address all of which we receive on a daily basis. Because every complaint that comes into our office is a failure of responsibility somewhere. Every inquiry we launch is evidence that someone somewhere abdicated. So where our caseload is light is maybe a space, Chairperson, and I want to posit that a light caseload may mean that somebody somewhere takes their responsibility seriously. Not because rights don't matter, but because the culture of responsibility would then be so strong, so embedded, so personally owned by people in positions of power, that violations might become the exception, not the rule. So, Commissioner Nissen, Chairperson Nissen, Chair is going to take you deep into the relationship between rights and responsibilities, and I know he will do it in the brilliance and passion that he always brings. But before he does, I want to leave you with this. Every right in the Constitution you are very familiar with. It comes with a promise. And every promise needs someone willing to keep it. So the question that I want to leave you before I'm going to ask Program Director to introduce Chairperson Nissen is the only question that really matters when you walk out of this lecture today. It's not what are my rights? The question is, whose promise are you willing to be? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carter. It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for the morning, Reverend Chris Nissen, the chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission. Reverend Nissen has actively been involved in advancing human rights and constitutional values in South Africa, and we are honored to have him here with us today. Thank you.
Let me take this opportunity to greet the Dean of the Faculty, Prof. Tini, the students, the student body of Fort Hare, the management of Fort Hare, my fellow colleagues of the Chapter 9 institutions and Chapter 10, which is namely the Commission on Equality, independently, and the Public Service Commission. All of you, good, allowing the South African Human Rights Commission to be part of an ongoing debate in this country of rights and responsibilities. We always say within the organization, when we engage with rights, we say it's rights and responsibilities are two sides of one coin. You can't have your rights and not be responsible. But I want to echo some of the issues that Dr. Carter has raised, and I'm joined by Yulisa from my office, who's the researcher, and this team from the Office of the Human Rights Commission in the Eastern Cape. Now, you see, there's a simple thing when you drive on the roads and then you see a sign that says, potholes ahead. Now, you know, and that sign across the country is being commissioned, the signage and the instruments is commissioned. So government has got money to put up signs, but they can't fix the potholes. So, you know, and the responsibility is not for those men, young men that's unemployed, that that fix the potholes with sand. And when the rain comes, it's gone again. So the sign is, in fact, a sign of irresponsibility, because that sign is warning you so that if you've got a tire burst or something, or you get damaged, your car get damaged, it says that you have been warned. You see? So it's an irresponsible behavior of an institution, of a government institution, that should be take responsibility. Your municipality, or the Buffalo municipality, had got one here, as Dr. Fikeni always used to say, a clean audit. A clean audit means that, you know, the money that you got, you are responsible for it, etc. And then they send money back to Treasury. Money gets sent back, billions are sent back to Treasury. But if you look around and say, how can a municipality that gets a clean audit allow the decay and make our society dysfunctional? But you've got a clean audit. The AG is happy with you. Hence, our engagement with the AG is to say, you know, the AG must, and it's the responsibility to audit, to see that there's responsible spending. But we've engaged the Auditor General's office and say, but why don't you audit the outcomes of value for money? You say you've got a clean audit, but what value did that money bring into a society? So, yeah, we can talk a lot about, you know, across the country where there are problems, and as Dr. Carter said, you know, everybody blames everybody and anybody, and nobody takes responsibility. This morning, we gather here to reflect on a subject that lies at the heart of our constitutional democracy. That is, rights and constitutional responsibilities, and the role of the state, institutions, communities, and individuals. 2026 marks 30 years of the South African Constitution. The Constitution is the founding document of our nation. It expresses our founding values and provides a framework through which state power is exercised. Individual and communal rights are protected and justice is realized. Ours is an aspirational and transformational constitution. It describes the kind of society we can become. It acknowledges our past, which was characterized by division, oppression, and limited state accountability. It's aspirational in that it envisages the kind of nation we can become. It provides a transformational framework within which we can heal the divisions of the past, redress the injustice of the past, and forge a new future premised on human dignity, non-racialism, and non-sexism, constitutional supremacy, and the respect for the rule of law. It is through the Constitution that state institutions are established and are given their powers. The obligations and responsibilities of government are set out in the Constitution. It sets clear guidelines for how the three arms of government interact and complement one another. It sets out the legal parameters. It tells us what to expect from the state and state actors. The Constitution does not only place responsibilities on state institutions and state actors. It goes further. It applies to us as individuals as well. It grants us certain rights. However, built within those rights are certain responsibilities we have towards one another. Those who have studied constitutional law know all too well about the vertical and horizontal application of the Constitution. At this point, to our theme and point of our discussion today, that all of us, state and individuals, have roles and responsibilities to make the aspirations and vision of the Constitution become a lived reality. The history of Human Rights Day and Human Rights Month should serve as a reminder to us all of those roles and responsibilities. It ought to remind us of a past which we never wish to see repeated again in this country. It should remind us to choose democracy, not only through the ballot, but in choosing to honor one another's dignity in our daily engagements with one another, in the work we do for those of us who are tasked with the responsibility to provide basic services to communities and upholding the rule of law. For our democracy to outlive us, it is critical to assert our rights whilst acknowledging the responsibility we have to respect the rights of others. Our rights are not absolute, and without any responsibility, rights stops being basic rights and become entitlement. Responsibility without rights becomes oppression. We have to constantly be aware of this as we assert our rights and give space for others to assert theirs. This is how our democracy will survive and outlive us. The state's first and primary responsibility is to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the socio-economic, the civil and political rights outlined in the Bill of Rights, Chapter 2. It must ensure that legislation and policies are enacted to fulfill this responsibility. The state has a duty to ensure its powers is exercised responsibly, reasonably, and transparently. When these principles are upheld, trust is built between the state and the citizens. When state neglects its responsibilities, that trust is broken and the rights of people become meaningless. And we begin to see a shift from trust individuals have not only for the state, but in the Constitution itself. It becomes incomprehensible for how the rights enshrined in the Constitution have any significance if people do not see the transformation in their daily lives. The Constitution becomes an unrealistic set of wishes when people still do not have access to clean water, to a quality education, to healthcare, including reproductive and mental health care services and other basic rights. The Constitution starts becoming a cross as something that only benefits the privileged few when people in our society continue to face racial and gender discrimination. When the state fulfills its constitutional obligations through transparency, accountability, fairness, and upholds the rule of law, democracy is alive and effective. When the state effectively fulfills its functions and delivers basic services, the social contract between it and its citizens remains intact. This strengthens democracy. Apart from the role of state, the role of the state is the role of institutions established to support constitutional democracy. This includes the South African Human Rights Commission, the Public Protector, the Auditor General, and others listed in Chapter 9 of the Constitution and Chapter 10. These institutions monitor government actions, investigate complaints pertaining to the conduct of government. They promote awareness of rights and are independent in the execution of their mandates. The role of these independent institutions supporting democracy is not to provide basic services. That is the exclusive role of government. What these institutions do is to investigate allegations of human rights violation. In the instance of the South African Human Rights Commission, to investigate allegations of maladministration, which is the role of the public protector. As we were driving here, my brother's son pointed out to us a latest development which was called the Stoep, where over 100 million allegedly was spent on paving and building the Stoep there at the beachfront. And the question was, is that a human rights violation? And indeed, is maladministration if it's true that it's used that money not in a proper way. So there we are to explain to you, yes, it has effect on your rights as well. And an example of this are the various investigations the South African Human Rights has conducted on access to various basic services by the Eastern Cape provincial government. For example, in 2024, the South African Human Rights Commission released its Roads Inquiry Report, which found that the Eastern Cape road conditions are a human rights violation as poor infrastructure severely hinders access to healthcare services, to education and economic opportunities. The Commission has also engaged with local, provincial and national government to discuss these matters related to policy considerations, service delivery and to the monitoring government's observation of human rights. Of course, the state and institutions supporting democracy cannot succeed in their role without the involvement of communities. Communities shape attitudes, norms, and movements working to achieve a common goal. Vibrant community structures contribute to the promotion and protection of rights. They have first-hand knowledge of the challenges faced with government services. They raise awareness, organize collectively to claim and enforce the rights of the community. As institutions of higher learning, universities are in themselves communities. For there is a community, your community as students, lecturers, support, and administrative staff, along with other stakeholders of the institutions. You are a community and individuals within the community with certain rights and responsibilities towards one another. By virtue of being a student within this institution, it means that you have exercised your right to access further education. There are, of course, those multiple challenges linked to the exercising of this right, such as access to funding. This academic year, in particular, admission space could not handle the number of learners and students who qualified for university entry. This becomes an additional layer to the funding, accommodation, and other challenges which already exist as a threat to accessing higher education. Your responsibility as students include keeping democracy alive. It includes getting involved in spaces where your voices are heard as you shape the future of your envisionment. We often make the mistake of saying young people are the future of leaders of our nation. However, this often deserves a nation of the energy, this often denies a nation of the energy and innovative minds. Now, a vibrant democracy is where young people play an active role in shaping it and carving its future. Young people are not leaders of the future, they are leaders of today. In saying this, I implore you to never sit on the margins, but to take an active role in not only claiming your rights, but to assist those who wish to claim theirs, but face challenges of access. Universities do not just prepare you for the future. They should prepare you to be responsible citizens now. Education is a social responsibility and not merely for personal advancement. As students, you have the responsibility to seek the truth. To not only seek truth, but to produce and disseminate truth. A university is a knowledge center, a place of critical thinking, not misinformation in a digital world with ever-advancing technology. Misinformation, disinformation, and digital manipulation through artificial intelligence pose modern complex challenges and human rights violations. The world needs innovative solutions to address these challenges. And so each student has a responsibility to utilize these technologies with integrity and observance of basic human rights. Misinformation spreads rapidly, especially on the social media platform. A harmless sharing of online communication has the potential effect to erode public trust on key state institutions. It poses a threat of democracy and public participation. Misinformation can affect how people make decisions, especially during elections. It causes division in society and fuels tension. All these undermine democracy and go against the very fundamental values our democracy is founded on. With the challenges students face in higher education, student protest action is unavoidable. Students have the constitutional right to protest and have responsibility to do so in accordance with prescripts of the law. Similarly, institutions of higher learning have the right to protect their infrastructure, but equally have a responsibility to safeguard the life and dignity of protesting students. In its report into the 2024 Walter Sisulu University unrest, the Commission found that 14 individuals required hospital treatment after sustaining protest-related injuries, 9 of whom were confirmed students and 3 sustained life-threatening injuries. The available photographic and ballistic evidence suggests that both ammunition, live ammunition, and the prohibited 5.56 millimeter and 9 millimeter rounds were likely discharged. Students also bore responsibility in the protest action and its consequences. It appeared that some students joined the N2 action without understanding the risk, whilst others reacted to the university to the unverified online information. And some experienced intimidation and peer pressure in its findings. In its findings, the Commission encouraged student bodies to promote responsible mobilization, critical engagement based on accurate information, and awareness of the legal parameters of protected protests. Although disinformation did not determine events, the inquiry noted that a false post claiming student fatalities circulated shortly before the police engagement. In closing, it has been both a pleasure and an honor to be here at Fort Hare this morning to deliver this address and to begin the first day of Human Rights Month in this institution. As you're well aware, Fort Hare has produced leaders who shaped the destiny of this country and continent. Their legacy reminds us that rights alone did not build South Africa's democracy. Responsibility did. The South African Constitution gives us rights. History will judge us by how responsible we are, how responsibly we use them, and how responsibly we safeguard them for our future generations. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Reverend Nissen, for that insightful and thought-provoking address. We will now open the floor for a Q&A session. I would like to call upon Dr. Ndlovu, the Head of Department of the Constitutional and Public Law Department, to facilitate the Q&A session.
I thought you were not going to clap, then I was going to declare a discrimination, Dr. Carter, but you did. Rev Nissen, thank you so much, Chair, for this lecture. We are trying to sort out some things, that's why you see me going in and out. But as you spoke, you sort of referred us to the injustices of the past that the Constitution speaks about. But what I also note, and I take from, I think, all the 3 speakers from the Dean, Dr. Carter, and yourself, is that currently we've got the injustices of the present. And I'm not negating the injustice of the past, but the injustice of the present in the sense of the government, ourselves, and the Chapter 9 institutions and courts failing to fulfill their mandate in our different spaces. And also maybe just to add a spanner to say, then you also referred to Section 7, the obligation to protect, to respect, to promote and fulfill the rights in the Bill of Rights, and I think it goes to all of us. So whether you're government, whether it is me in my workplace, whether it is a student in class, what do you do in order to fulfill that mandate? So I'm going to take, I think, 4 questions to this side in the first round. I know that we're working on a very tight schedule. The chairperson might leave before the program ends, so let's keep our questions very short. You introduce yourself very quickly, and then you say your question, please. So I'll take 2 hands this side and 2 hands this side. Law students. If I was in class, I would have said volunteers can be chosen too. All right, so there's a question there. Do we have another mic? Please, if you can go that side, please.
One, two, check. Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Wesa Pikashe, and I'm currently enrolled as the third year LLB student at the Faculty of Law. And I'm also serving as the chairperson of Amnesty Advocating for Human Rights as the chairperson. Chair, my question lies within what you have heavily relied on in terms of responsibilities that the individuals have. So my question is that, given that the institution have constitutional mandate in ensuring that they realize this progressive realization of these rights, so how do we then expect the individuals to uphold their responsibilities of ensuring that firstly they respect the rights of others, and secondly, we understand that the grievance arises as a result of the institution failing to provide service delivery. How do we then maintain a social cohesion wherein the state institutions themselves fails to ensure that they progressively realize these rights of the individuals? And further, to just make an emphasis on the case of Khutbum, wherein it was argued that the state will only be able to provide resources within their available resources that they have. So how do we then ensure that the individuals are able to uphold their responsibilities without, how do we ensure that the individuals are able to uphold their responsibilities without the state even being able to fulfill their own responsibilities as well? Thank you so much.
Okay. If we can have another question, please. I think there's another hand that's.
Thank you so much, panelists. My name is Pelele Vava. I'm currently doing my third year. I will quote, or I want to ask a question based on the previous speaker mentioned that Human Rights Commission usually investigate the crimes that occurred in the government sectors, universities, and societies. I want to emphasize on the part of universities. Last year in this institution, University of Fort Hare, we faced a major strike whereby students protested. Also at Walter Sisulu University, Mthatha University, students decided to do a protest or a march, I can say so. But we found out that universities don't have the strategies or implementations to respond to the strike. They normally set police to fire the students, and that is against the human rights. So my question that I want to ask today is universities have the proper policies on how to handle the protests that occur in the university spaces? And also another question that I want to ask is that since Human Rights Commission is the one that is responsible for investigating these crimes that occur at the universities, do they have, since they investigate, do they give what must be done? Do they give, okay, since there was a strike, this is the implementation? Because we can't be facing the same thing as students each and every year when we protest, when we fight for our human rights in universities. We find out that universities decide to shoot us. We find out universities decide to chase us at homes. That is not the proper way of handling these strikes. So we want the Human Rights Commission today to give us strategies, what must be done, what must be implemented, what students must do when they face this particular issue without being evicted from the premises, without being evicted from the university premises. Thank you so much.
I don't see any other question, Chair. Maybe we can invite you to respond, but maybe just a comment on the last one. And I think we are going to share the report that was lodged by the Commission. There was a serious investigation done by the But the Human Rights Commission, Mr. Vava, if you can, yeah, please. So I think that report has been made, it's been launched, and it has been shared, I think, with various stakeholders. We were part of the, I think, the launching process. So I think it does give us guidelines in terms of what are the roles and responsibilities of both the institutions of higher learning as well as the rights I think, of students. So Chair, I'll give it to you maybe to respond. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, on the last part of the question about, the Human Rights Commission giving some recommendations. When the Human Rights Commission investigates, it goes to all the role players, and then there will be an assessment of what happened, who are the individuals involved or institutions involved, and then makes her recommendations. And then the recommendations go to the various actors, and from there we monitor the implementation of those recommendations that we're making. Sometimes we, as the Commission, we can also do mediation, and we also have alternative dispute resolution. So the Commission, after its investigation, and it's not just one person that looks at that report, the Commission takes it vigorously through a process within the Commission and identify the recommendations that needs to be made. But we do not leave it there. We continue to monitor those recommendations that we've made. Now, we are in court at the moment around what our recommendations or our findings, if I can say findings or recommendations and directives. We're in court because of whether our findings and our directives, whether that is binding. But the Commission has also got the power to litigate. And we've got a few litigations on the go at the moment. The issue around, the expectation that individuals must have responsibility with their rights, whereas their rights are being violated in terms of the socioeconomic rights and others. We can't, after 30 years of democracy, not see a movement forwards, because every government department has got a budget. And before that budget, let's take local government. Local government has got the IDPs, right? That's a tool to be used where communities are engaged through their wards and through their structures to tell the local government what is needed in your area. But sometimes we feel there's a lack of participation in those IDP meetings, Integrated Development Plan, in order to have a plan for your area and for your town. Other times we find that because I'm a councillor, I make sure that I want that IDP to look the way I want it to look. And therefore, sometimes call the meeting where people are not fully informed. When you are informed, you can participate. When you're informed, you can be responsible. But if you are not informed and you don't know what's happening, then that social cohesion is no longer there. We live in a country where there are three ugly things. There's inequality, unemployment, and poverty. Now, we can't say after 30 years of democracy, and the best constitution, and people don't eat the constitution. They must live with that constitution, and that constitution must live for them. And so, yes, I agree that the social cohesion does get affected. And in that sense that you can't be saying, oh, and I'll go back to what Prof said about, the injustice of today. We can no longer just throw and blame apartheid. We must blame those who are in power, those councillors, members of parliament. We must go to them and say the future of this country lies in their hands as it lies in our hands. And so, yes, social cohesion does get affected because of the lack of service delivery in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. Any last two questions? I see there's a hand here. Okay, let's take these three, then I think we'll close for questions. 4.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Baba Lamofukeng. I am a 4th year LLB student. And I just want to pose a question on what Dr. Carter said. I think she posed really interesting questions. She explains how there are different sectors and structures and levels of responsibility, which often result in excuses and shifting responsibility, or rather redirecting human rights issues elsewhere. So we are also gathered here discussing our strong views on human rights and all these surrounding factors around it. So my question then becomes, how does the South African Human Rights Commission ensure that it works effectively across these sectors, and also moving beyond just us discussing and also just preventing institutions, particularly from shifting responsibilities just to actual practical enforcement and protection of human rights? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Greetings to everyone. My name is Yanga Bangata. I think for me, my question is directed to Dr. Carter. I think from her presentation, she mentioned, she put an emphasis on responsibility, on us as individuals, institutions, taking responsibility for human rights being realized in society. But I think for me, my question would be, does the Human Rights Commission, do you think that the Human Rights Commission has had a failure, if not failure, maybe failure is a strong word, a challenge in terms of holding institutions accountable? I think you mentioned that every time where there's an issue and the Human Rights Commission has to come to act, it is usually because there's someone somewhere who has failed in terms of responsibility. And now my question is there a challenge maybe in holding institutions accountable for those failures and responsibilities? Because it's a problem growing up in South Africa and seeing that somehow there is an enmity between institutions and individuals. You heard my brother here. There seems to be an enmity between students and institutions and of higher learning. Even the irregular human being, there seems to be an enmity between them and the government, which is supposed to be providing rights or providing services to them. So that is my question. Is there maybe a failure or a challenge? If there is a challenge, what is that challenge? Thank you very much.
Good day, everyone. My name is Mpoma Langeni, and the question that I have today is, how can academic research contribute to human rights advocacy? Since in class we are, or rather when you have to write maybe a research on something, you are told that there are certain topics that you cannot write about. How do we then contribute to human rights advocacy when you are told that you cannot write about a certain topic because you don't know the race that will be reading your research? Like, for example, when you have to talk about Section 25 of the Constitution about land expropriation, like those type of topics are then limited because you have to be considerate of the person that will be reading your research. So I want to know, Hore, how can we then, us as students how can we as the students who want human rights to be, I don't know how to put this, but I want to know how can we then uphold the rights that are in the Constitution when you are limited to talk about the rights that, especially us as blacks, we have been affected, like something like that.
Thank you so much. I think those were the 3 hands. There's a very last one at the back.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Agnolia Mongala, and I am a fourth year extended. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm a fourth year extended program student. So my question to Dr. Ndlovu, I just wanted to ask, how can we as students, beside academic side, how can we contribute to this human rights topic in action? Because I'm aware that we know of cases like life demony cases. We know of cases such as state capture cases. We know cases that we follow at the moment of the Madlanga Commission. But from my observation, I have realized that actually it is affecting human rights in a way, because on the budget, the money that should be allocated to giving people water, to giving education, to providing food, to eliminate poverty, is instead being budgeted or taken to cover that aspect of it. So I want to know from our side as academics, what role can we play? What can we do beside going, let's say for an example, on the Expropriation Act? I know that we mostly black here, and we definitely are affected by such. But I want to know, where can we go and make sure that our voices are heard, besides just standing behind books, writing articles, but actually doing it to ensure that a black child is empowered. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think there was only one question for you. If you've got any remarks, Chair, then I'll give to Dr. Carter. And it was all for Dr. Carter. Okay. Apologies. Dr. Carter?
Thank you so much, Doc. Thanks, Chair. And thank you, colleagues and students, for those very thought-provoking questions. Hot seat. Groot boom. Yes, groot boom. We always call it the abdication clause, the internal limitation clause of available resources, progressive realization. But that's not what it is. It perhaps gives us, a view that government gets a little bit of time to implement rights that are not necessarily immediately realizable. And your lecturers in the rooms and your profs in the rooms will be able to guide you through the academic literature on that. But what does that practically mean? And I want to put it back to you. And I want to link it up to what can you practically do as students as well. Because progressive realization within available resources surely means there needs to be progress. Surely means we will be able to measure it against some sort of baseline. When we speak about Grootboom, we also speak about TAC case, we speak about Mazibuko. But then I want to throw in a case that we want to practically bring back to the Eastern Cape as well, because I'm going to challenge you to have a look out in the coming months on what we're going to do about it. Who remembers the Subramuni case? Hands up. Come, legals. I know you do. Subramuni case also spoke about access to healthcare and emergency healthcare and basically what does it entail. But it's more than 20 years old, and we spoke about progressive realization. Now, as the Human Rights Commission, our duty is threefold. We need to monitor, we need to implement and promote and monitor the protection of the human rights. But we also need to make recommendations to government on policies, on human rights concerns that we have. And I want to reference Subramuni now. So, more than 2 decades ago, renal dialysis and services, we know what the court said. And we spoke about progressive realization. Now, fast forward. What happens if we're still sitting in the same situation decades after, speaking about progressive realization? What happens? Is it not time for us to measure whether we have in fact progress? Shouldn't we go back and assess whether there has been progress against these internal limitation clauses? And I want to reflect on what the chairperson then said this morning. The Human Rights Commission, we've got a big job. Goodness, we've got a big job. And I also mentioned I wish we didn't have that bigger job, because it doesn't look like it's getting any less. My chairperson, we all need raises. Ne? Salary needs to be increased. We've got a big job in terms of what our Commissioner Ntuli also refers to as the constitutional conversation. To include government departments, responsible stakeholders, to convince the judiciary, to convince communities, lecture halls like this, on what it in fact means to realize human rights. Now, does it mean that we hear a complaint like we've heard here this morning about concerns about land expropriation, concerns about lack of resources? Does it mean that the Human Rights Commission hears it, assesses it, and leaves it there? No, it doesn't. We have mechanisms that Chairperson has indicated here this morning that we can use and which are at our disposal to not go and connect your electricity. I can't go and be your service provider, but I can reflect on what the Constitution tells me to do, and that is to take steps towards the realization and redress of human rights abuses. Now, what are those steps? And I want you to remember the word steps, because we can't run to the finish line. We can't fly to there. We have to take one step at a time, taking each other's hands from an assessment point of view, from gathering information from you here today, and taking the steps towards redress and resolving these issues that you point out to us today. Now, in terms of how we do that, at the end of the day is what Chairperson Nissen has indicated, and that Doc has indicated here today that the Commission has done. And I'm very encouraged that you have access to those resources as well as an academic institution, but also as members of a community. Google or go on ChatGPT, go on Grok and ask it. Ask it, where's these Human Rights Commission reports, where your own university sat on the panel of our roads inquiry and made very valuable recommendations, Doc, which now have led to us taking steps towards redress. And Chairperson Nissen has pointed out here today and making that recommendations to government. Now, we have the Constitution that determines what we do, but we also have our mandating legislation, which then empowers us to put forward what that legislation says to stakeholders. Now, we gave them 60 days to respond in terms of how they intend to abide by our recommendations in the roads report, because, friends, only 9% of the Eastern Cape is paved, against a 25% average across the country. Now, we've made very clear recommendations on how to address that. We've given timelines and how the government should be responding to us. And at the end of the day, what we did is we provided them with the mechanisms to take these steps towards redress. And what we are doing now is we are monitoring. We are keeping a very close eye. And you can have a look out for what the Commission is doing. Then I want to give you another mechanism that we are applying as the Human Rights Commission. Tomorrow, we have subpoenaed the Department of Health in this province, and they will be appearing before us. Because we are not satisfied with the health status of this province, and they will come under oath, colleagues, under oath, and tell us why does it appear that the health system in this province is failing. That is another mechanism that the Human Rights Commission uses to take steps towards redress. But what happens after we subpoena? Colleagues, last year we subpoenaed the Premier of the Eastern Cape. And the Premier appeared before Chairperson Nissen and gave reasons on why and how they were addressing the plight of malnutrition within the province. Now, these all form part of these steps I want you to remember that the Human Rights Commission takes towards providing redress. And those can happen not in isolation of each other, but they can be used by the Commission and by yourselves to move towards rights realization. Is it an easy task? No. Is it quick? Absolutely not. But do we have an opportunity to abdicate this responsibility? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that is why I want to invite you on these questions, and I've thrown them all under the umbrella about how do we take these steps, and what does the Commission do, and do we just leave what some people call a toothless recommendation? Absolutely not. Because even the judgment that the Human Rights Commission is currently challenging, the SCA judgment, said that the Human Rights Commission's recommendations cannot be ignored. And that is a very low threshold. And you better believe that the Commission is following up on all of its recommendations. The Rhodes Report, we have an Enyobeni report, we have a malnutrition report, we've got pit toilets reports. And colleagues, there are 3 reports pending on water service quality, on bucket systems, on so many issues in this province that we promise to you as communities that we are taking these steps to provide redress. Now, how can you get involved? Doc and Prof, I'm not going to go into the why are my students being prevented from writing on Section 25. I have questions, ne? I have questions on that. But I also want to venture into that question. Don't limit yourselves in providing your opinion only on academic fora. What nonsense are you talking about on social media? Why haven't you provided us with your view on social media? Voicing your concerns that Prof has already indicated here this morning about the global issues that we are faced with. Or are we speaking about the latest scandal that we've seen? Or are we, like Chairperson Nissen indicated this morning, actively participating in misinformation and disinformation and deepfakes? Do not limit yourselves to the platform of academia. Go beyond that. And whilst academia, Prof, Doc, are still discussing your proposals for research, Section 25, please, let's engage on that. You have an opportunity in opinion pieces. You can go to your council meetings. You can share your voices around the dinner table. And you can mobilize towards rights realization. You do not need a proposal to be approved to do that. So the last comment I just wanted to make is the responsibility. Are we struggling to hold those to account? Chairperson, sometimes. But again, I want to reflect to say that that does not mean we get to abdicate our responsibility to take steps towards accountability. And the chairperson here has indicated this morning that as the Human Rights Commission, not only are we bound by our legislation, but the Constitution gives us this duty. And we will forever be bound by what this country has very hardly fought for. And that is why we brought you, even the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, here today to tell you that we will keep to that promise. Thank you. Doc?
Thank you so much, Dr. Carter. Maybe just to answer on the Section 25 question, I can tell you now that looking at all the academics here, including our dean, we are currently supervising some thorny contemporary issues. There's no limit whatsoever that we have. So it could be that maybe there was a misunderstanding by the colleague, but we'll engage even that as well. It will be an unjust limitation, I suppose. I can tell you that we've got some of the most interesting topics on our LLMs, LLD, and LRM students. So yeah. And then there was a question that was directed to me at the back. I can tell you now that that question will be answered by our next panel discussion. Prof. Paul specifically will address that on my behalf, I suppose. And very lastly from me, just to say that in addition to what we do as academics, we've got a legal aid clinic. So we do community engagement activities, particularly constitutional literacy. You spoke about that we can only empower communities if we've got access to information. We take that to the communities through our legal aid clinic, beyond just writing articles, etc., that sometimes the government doesn't even read. I think there's a disconnect between what we write as academics and the implementation of policies. And at some point, we need to bridge that gap because it might improve our service delivery. So thank you so much, Chairperson. I'm going to take it back to the Program Director for the next part.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ndlovu. We are now going to move on to a segment of messages of support from the various constitutional institutions. For this segment, I will ask that the representative from the Commission on Gender Equality come up first, and then the representative from the IEC, and finally the representative from the Public Service Commission. I will ask these colleagues to please be mindful of time, as engagements will continue on the panel discussion. So the representative from the Gender Equality Commission, please.
Thanks, Program Director. Good morning to the Chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, the Human Rights Commission Manager, Dr. Carter, and all the dignitaries that are inside the House, the academia, and the students. I'm representing the Commission for Gender Equality. My name is Nceba Mkhwebo. The Commission for Gender Equality, as we all know, is one of the Chapter 9 institutions set up by an Act of Parliament, Act number 39 of 1996, as well as set up in terms of Section 187 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. We are mandated to do the following: protect, promote, attain, and advance gender equality. I'm pleased that we are speaking a platform with our sister Chapter 9. Thanks for the opportunity that you provide us to engage with the student on the issues that you are discussing around the accountability as well as the advancing of human rights. The Commission, in terms of its promotion, we have the department that is called Public Education and Information Department, which leads programs such as Men and Boys and Toxic Male Masculinity, as well as the programs on gender mainstreaming and gender and development. This is where we interface with the communities on gender and development, where we engage them what is the meaning of gender and why is it is important to protect the rights of every individual not to be discriminated on the basis of their gender. On the gender mainstreaming one, we focus mostly on the government department, local government, institutions of higher learning. South Africa has a policy, an old policy, which is gender and women empowerment policy, which set the basis for gender mainstreaming, as well as the Beijing Platform for Action, which set the basis for the gender mainstream, where we want to see the voices of both men and women in policy, as well as in planning of government programs or any interventions. For an example, Chairperson made an example of the IDP. We want to see the voices of women in the IDP being expressed explicitly, that their needs, they are catered for within the IDP. But also the Commission derive its mandate on a myriad of legislations. These will then include the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, which is the PEPUDA. We derive a mandate for that act so that we take any discrimination on the basis of gender to the Equality Court, and we raise and conscientize communities around the functioning of the Equality Courts. Now, when it comes to accountability, I'm trying to summarize. We have done a number of work with institutions of higher learning since 2014. Fortunately, University of Fort Hare VC was one of the VCs that was invited on gender transformation on institutions of higher learning. Rhodes University, Nelson Mandela University, Walter Sisulu University, almost all the universities in South Africa, we have covered them. But our focus was on gender mainstreaming because there was this perception that the academic environment at times is not conducive to academics that are women in terms of promotion and occupying decision-making position. While we're also focusing on the scourge of gender-based violence in institutions of higher learning, what are the mechanisms that are there to report cases of sexual harassment by the student, by the lecturers themselves, or by the employees within these institutions? We have also conducted, in terms of the promotion and the protection, we have done a report in Eastern Cape was conducted on neonatal and maternal health, the state of neonatal and maternal health in Eastern Cape, where we visited, an oversight visit were conducted in 7 hospitals in the province of the Eastern Cape. Nelson Mandela, it was Dorang Inza Hospital, Livingston Hospital. Buffalo City, it was Frere, Grey Hospital, and then we moved to Butterworth, then Lusikisiki, St. Elizabeth Hospital. Now we are in the process of, we have already engaged the HOD of the department on some of the issues that we identify that are the main cause of what you call medical legal claims in the hospitals of the Eastern Cape, including the issue of infection controls, including the issue of lack of security in the hospitals that we visited. We engaged with the Premier and we are also monitoring them in terms of implementation, that particular report, to see to it that they implement the recommendation, but we are pleased with the fact that at Doranginza, at least they have started to address the issues of infection controls, because what was happening in the neonatal ward, the roof was leaking. There were pigeons, which at times the air that's supposed to be, they're supposed to be purified or clean at certain conditions, at certain temperatures. Those things were not there, but now they are starting to address those things because we find there was a high infection of neonatals amongst themselves because of the polluted conditions within that particular hospital. The Commission has also conducted a study, which was also a study on the issue of abuse of elderly, but looking at the gender lens on the abuse of elderly. This was a result of an episode that was shown on TV. A woman in Cape Town, an older woman, was beaten by a young man, say, "Takbeta mama, takbeta makul." Then the commissioners deemed it fit that let's go deep, dive deep. What are the main causes of gender that are engendered in terms of abuse of elderly people, including elderly women? So we visited what we called the old age homes, where we find that there's also the challenges in terms of allocation. Some of these elderly places are still racially based, where you place a person in a former white old age home, per individual, they are getting 1.8. But when you go to the former black old age home, they are sitting at around 740 in terms of what social development gave them. So those are some of the things that we're highlighting, but also we wanted to know what drives these older women and older men to the old age homes, which one of the things that we find was an abuse at homes, was a sexual violence in our homes. Most people that were in Mthatha, they were from Lusikisiki. Some of them, they were saying because their children work outside, because they were implicated on issues such as witchcraft, they deem it fit that they took their parents to the place where they feel that they are supposed to be accommodated. So there is a myriad of legislation, as I said, but the most important issue that we want to leave with the student and the academia is a thorny issue that has always been reported in the media, which is the issue of sexual harassment in the institutions of higher learning. That's one thing that we want to engage with the University of Fort Hare. Fortunately, I was part of the session by Legal Law Research Center, where they are saying maybe we need to shift towards sexual corruption, because what is going on is sexual corruption where people are abusing their power to advance whatever interest they have. So there's that voice that is coming to say there must be a legislation to deal directly with sexual corruption in all sectors of society. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you. Now the representative from the IEC.
All right, thank you, Program Director. Allow me to say all protocol observed and greetings to the House at large in the spirit of democracy. Good day, colleagues. My name is Aviwe Mbambo and I come from the IEC. I'm managing the Great Kai local office, and today I will be giving you a presentation on how do we feature and what's our constitutional mandate. How do we practice oversight, and what features do we have that advance human rights? All right, like the other Chapter 9 institutions, we have been tasked with the responsibility of supporting democracy. But the IEEC has a unique feature in that we do support democracy, however, we entrench electoral democracy. So we are also established in terms of the Constitution, and we form part of those Chapter 9 institutions. Now, you would ask, how do we manage these elections? How do we entrench electoral democracy? That is found in our mandate. The first legal responsibility or obligation that we have is to manage elections at a national level, provincial level, and municipal level. What do we mean? In order for us to have a national government, an election must be convened, and it must be properly administered by observing the correct pieces of legislation that give us a guidance and act as a manual feature on how do we hold an election, what counts as a credible election, and what counts as a spoiled ballot, a counting ballot, and at the end of the day, how is that ballot paper affecting power for an ordinary voter? Then we also have our provincial elections. The provincial elections, together with the national elections, are governed by a piece of legislation that we call the Electoral Act. It gives us a manual guide on how to effectively manage elections at a national level and a provincial level. We then have our municipal elections. We can all attest to that. We've been seeing some kind of movement. There's loud noise on LGE 2026. Those are the elections that we are preparing for. That is our local government elections. We also manage elections in order for us to have municipal management. Those that are going to be office bearers are voted for into power. And the only way for them to go into power is through the ballot paper. And the outcome of the ballot papers and those results will then in turn interpret who will be holding the power and who will be representing us. We have the Municipal Electoral Act that governs that type of an election. Now you would ask yourself, how do we manage these elections without compromising or undermining our constitutional mandate? The first thing is that we must ensure that these elections are free and fair. And I'm so happy that we have got young people in this room, because sometimes when we say elections are free and fair, it sounds like it's just a normal word that we use, like it's free and fair. And then it has no value to it, no meaning attached to it. But let me take you through a small political science class, just 2 seconds. Before we had democracy, freeness and fairness had a big value that is attached to it. Before democracy and even before the apartheid rule, South Africa was divided into colonies. And in those colonies, there were different constitutions that applied for the citizens of each area that was governed by each type of a colony. And the freeness and the fairness of an election, I want to go into that issue. When it came to the Cape Colonies, for example, the freeness and fairness was compromised. How? In 1856, you would find that the legislations of the Cape Colony were inclusive, but strategically. To say that the whites are allowed to represent the citizens in parliament, they can participate in election as representatives and as ordinary voters. No one else. However, we had our colored communities, Indian and our black communities that were also allowed to participate, but there were conditions. You had to have property rights. You had to have land that had economic value. And how many people had land of economic value during the Bantu laws? How many black people? Close to nothing. And then these laws also said there's a literacy condition that is attached to this right to vote by people of color. And you must be literate. If you are not literate, you cannot read or write, then you cannot participate in an election. And today, our grandmothers and the elderly and those that are illiterate are allowed an opportunity and even given provision by the Constitution to be assisted. So when we look at these features and mandates, we sometimes overlook and take them for granted, but they've got so much value attached to them. So we manage elections in a free and a fair manner. We have to ensure conditions that are conducive for free and fair elections. How do we do so? We ensure that we ascribe to certain values at each and every voting station, where there will be a voting process. Outside, when we're having special votes, these values need to be ascribed to. We ascribe to impartiality, where there is fairness, no prejudice or biasness. We cannot be seen to be favoring a certain religion, a certain culture, a certain political party. The laws are very strict when it comes to the issue of impartiality. We have another value which is important, and I think it speaks to the decay of democratization, and that is integrity. We need to make sure that all our processes are done in an honest manner so that we can have a credible outcome. Those election results can be accepted at the end of the day. Then there's an issue of transparency, an issue of responsiveness. All stakeholders, their concerns and their questions on election processes, whether at the voting stations, after the voting, during the counting, we ensure that we answer, we respond, and we take accountability. And then lastly, we've got accountability. So all these values really do lay a foundation for public trust, and we enhance credibility so that our election outcomes can be received well by all those who will be represented at the end of the day. Then again, it wouldn't make sense to manage elections, observe all these values, and not declare the results. So a third feature of our mandate is to ensure that we declare the results within a period legislated. So for example, normally an election will be held on a Wednesday. So the election says within 7 days, those election results must be declared. And we cannot have election results that are like a maybe in between. No, they must be definite. So we declare results within 7 days. Not 7 working days, but 7 days. So if it was a Wednesday, we count each day going forward, including weekends. All right. And then, of course, we also have a lot of stakeholders, a lot of role players that make the election possible. And as we are managing elections, remember, it's a very contentious ground. Even though we are not political, we are free of biasness, but at the end of the day, we are managing a political process, and it becomes very tricky. So what is our role when it comes to oversight? The first thing that we do, we implement what we call independent monitoring. What is independent monitoring? For example, at each and every voting station, we will have election observers. The election observers come from our domestic institutions. It can be a normal NPO, an NGO, an academic institution, can deploy persons that have interest in election processes to observe our election processes. Even the international community can also deploy people at a voting station to observe our processes. And as a political science scholar, I remember writing on issues of conflict in Burundi. And sometimes you would find that it was a result of a political or an election outcome that was not accepted. And when it comes to the recommendations of what steps must be taken by that election management body, the reports by the election observers came in very handy. And some of them were implemented so that the election act of those countries can be advanced or bettered or improved. The second feature when it comes to independent monitoring, the political parties are participating and they are the highest or the high profile stakeholder because they've got high interest level in the process of election itself. So even they can deploy agents at the voting stations to observe the process, starting from the registration process, the voting process, up until the counting and the determination of the results. They do not have a constitutional mandate of observing only. They observe and raise objections when they identify irregularities on each and every step. Then again, we have the media. The media also plays a very crucial role when it comes to oversight because they give us real-time news on what is happening on election day. All right, and then the next thing, we've got a legislative obligation to conduct research into electoral matters. Whenever we are going to be holding an election, we make sure that we apply what the law says. For example, not so long ago, we had the independent candidates that said, we are not a part of the electoral process at a national and provincial level. We want to form part of it. Then the legislation was amended to include those that feel are not a part of the process. So those are one of the things that we implement to ensure for oversight. And then just to go lastly on how we advance human rights. The issue of eligibility to vote. Eligibility to vote, we always say it, if you are 18 years of age, you've got an ID, you're a South African citizen, and you are registered to vote, you can vote. But this right is actually very important. I'll go back to the colonial rule. Even the definition of a citizen back in the days was actually formed or constructed to exclude certain races. And the inclusivity of even the definition of a citizen empowers all South Africans to observe the right of participating in adult suffrage. We again have the inclusion of vulnerable groups. We have our disability group. We have our elderly. We provide platforms such as Special Vote where we conduct home visit. We visit each home of those that are vulnerable so that they too can be included in our processes. And then again, I'm glad that I'm at the University of Fort Hare. Even right now, we have a youth engagement. We have a program called Tertiary Institutions Campaign, where we go out and we say, we know that there is a disjuncture when it comes to formal participation. The youth prefers being a part of social movements that are not really formal. And then we have to recognize all these places where the youth meets even though they are not formal. And we say, we want you to form a part of the process, not for you to just feature for appearance purposes, but we want you to have a meaningful purpose. So we have a tertiary institutions campaign that runs through the Outreach and Communications Division, whereby the youth has been employed and contracted by the IEC to engage with their fellow students, to encourage participation by the youth so that they too can register and at the same time enhance their knowledge on the processes, but at the same time be a part of the process. Thank you so much, Program Director.
Thank you very much. Can I please have the representative from the Public Service Commission?
Thank you very much, Program Director. I would write on the protocol that has been articulately established. Chair, good to see you, my leader. Because I don't want the Program Director to stand next to me before I finish. My name is Vuyani Mapolisa. I'm the Commissioner of the Eastern Cape Public Service Commission. Thank you very much for inviting us to this very important event. Prof, I also acknowledged you. I'll summarize. I've been given 2 scripts of speaking notes, but I won't have time to look at them. I'm not alone. I'm with our provincial manager, Mama Pindiwe Cheta there. As Chair has articulated very well that we are institutions supporting democracy, but we're not chapter 9, we're chapter 10. We've got the whole chapter dedicated to us, Dr. Carter. You guys are all in chapter 9. Section 195 and section 196. Public Service Commission is about, in summary, overseeing the government, especially the provinces, provincial departments, and national departments on issues of service delivery. We've got our Act, Public Service Commission Act, is currently under amendment because we are now to include local government as well as public entities that were otherwise excluded by the first legislation. In summary, we deal with issues of service delivery. We do inspections, inspection sites. When Gender Commission spoke about visiting hospitals, we do the same. Home affairs departments, institutions where there are issues of concern on our own accord without receiving any complaint. But secondly, we also respond to complaints around issues of service delivery, people not having IDs, even issues of waters and roads. We've got a lot of those kind of cases. We also do inspections of service delivery points and sites, including buildings, if they are complying with health and safety, to an extent that we even recommend closing a government building if we feel that it is not safe. We also deal with grievances. Grievances are labor-related matters. If employees are not satisfied with how their labor complaints have been dealt with by the employers, they are free to come to us if they exhausted the internal channels, including their labor relations unit. They're free to come to us. We deal with such grievances. Also, we deal generally with human resource practices, such as promotions, PMDS, Performance Management and Development System. We also deal a lot with issues of suspensions. We found that there's been an abuse of suspensions in the government where if somebody is not agreeing with the supervisor, just gets suspended without following a due process, where suspensions are actually used as a punitive measure instead of a precautionary measure. We deal with such issues. Also, we have a department that deals with integrity, ethics and integrity. That's where we want senior management in particular to disclose their income, their houses, their cars, their investments, their shares. If you are in that position of responsibility, you must disclose. We've got systems that are helping us. Even if you don't disclose, we will know that you have a car, we have agreement with the deeds office in Natis. So we will know with Treasury, we will know if you've got an asset that you don't disclose. Trust me, we discover a lot of that because that's where corruption resides most of the time. We also have whistleblower lines where people can call us on anonymously, and then we follow such cases and we investigate such cases. So that's in a nutshell what we do. We've got figures here that you have, how many grievances, how many complaints, how many, but we don't want to bore with you that. I think what's relevant is how relevant is PSC to human rights, being the month of human rights. I think it's important, Dr. Carter will agree that as institutions supporting democracy here in the Eastern Cape, we've got a forum, we call it the Forum of ISDs, under the legislature because we all report to the legislature. So we work with the legislature. We have a joint approaches. Some investigations we actually do with other ISDs. For example, Auditor General, there's a department that we are pursuing now for list of corruption and maladministration. So we call other partners also to work with us. Another point, as I'm landing, is the issue of the tooth. People say these institutions don't have tooth. I think Dr. Carter has alluded to that. We subpoena departments, HODs, we have subpoenaed quite a number, just only in this financial year, to come before us and take an oath so they know they wouldn't lie. And if they don't, we are able to take them to court and open a criminal case, or else even fine them. So we do bite, and we also take the case law that's there on public protector. We use that case law a lot because it applies also to us. We need, because somebody said, how come there are so many complaints and lack of service delivery, yet you are there? We need capacity. We don't have capacity. If, Prof, you can give us final students to do labor law and constitutional, and you fund them, you give them money. We've got a space. We need a lot of investigations that needs to be done by law students in particular. Thank you very much.
Before we move on to our panel discussion, since the chair will be leaving soon, I would like to call upon the dean and the chair. Please stand.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Reverend, we already have a relationship, a healthy one, with the Human Rights Commission. So this is not capturing in advance. This is just a token of appreciation from the Faculty of Law at this great University of Fort Hare. We appreciate your time. We appreciate that you graced us with your presence. Your presentation, I think, judging by, from the questions, interactions we had, it was well received by colleagues. And I think, as we, this lecture, Dr. Carter, is growing from strength to strength. It's becoming, a platform for a very fruitful engagement. We wanted to keep it like that, to grow it and attract more audience. Thank you so very much, sir. Can I invite the head of the Department of Public and Constitutional Law, as we taking photos? I see cameras, are doing what cameras do. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As we move on to our panel discussion, I would like to ask the panelists to please join us on stage. Mr. Mhwebo, Prof. Poko, Ms. Mbambo, and Commissioner Mapolisa. Please join us on stage. The stairs are that side. Give you the mic. Do we have another mic for the stage? The mic. No, they are all there. A panel discussion will be facilitated by Dr. Odendaal.
Thank you, Ms. Thatchell. My name is Anel Odendaal. It's my privilege to facilitate this panel discussion. We've been listening to amazing presentations, good questions, answers, robust discussions, but I think now we're going to continue with these discussions. We've got people up on the stage, and we're going to ask them some difficult questions now. No, don't stress. Maybe before we get started, because I want all of you to please stay and make sure you also use the opportunity to ask our panel members questions. So quickly stand up, so that, because we've been sitting for a long time, stand up quickly. Everyone stand up, yeah, just stand up. Move around, okay? Okay. And then you can sit again, breathe, and then you feel better, and you can listen to our panel members, and then you can ask questions. I'm going to give you the opportunity after I've asked some questions. Is the sound okay? It doesn't sound so. Panel members, while I get my notes ready with my difficult questions, I would appreciate it if you can each, I know you have been introduced, maybe not Prof. Poko properly. If you can just quickly remind everyone your name and where you are from, and then I'm going to get my questions and pose questions to you. And then when I pose questions to you, if you can use 2 to 5 minutes to briefly answer, and then we're going to discuss it. But yeah, if you can quickly introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Tsidi Poko, a professor of law and the chairholder, UNESCO Oliver Tambo Chair of Human Rights, based in Alice. Thank you.
Afternoon, Chair and the audience. My name is Nceba Mhwebo. I'm the provincial manager for the Commission for Gender Equality in the Eastern Cape. Thanks.
Afternoon, Chair and the House at Large. My name is Aviwe Kwichimbambo, and I am from the IEC.
Good day to all. Vuyani Mapolisa, Commissioner, Public Service, Eastern Cape.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to have all of you here with us today. I'm going to pose a question to the whole panel. So I would like each of you to give a brief answer to this question, but then to some of you, I've got an additional question. So you must please listen carefully. You each will get one question, and some might get 2 questions, and then I want you just take turns and to quickly respond to both questions, and then we're going to take the discussion from there. So my question that I want to pose to all of you is, human rights protection is not solely the responsibility of the state, and I think that's what Dr. Carter so clearly explained this morning about the responsibility. But then it also requires active participation from institutions, communities, and individuals. So the question I want to pose to all of you, to the whole panel, is, in your view, and I know some of you have touched on it, but if you can just briefly state again, in your view, how can South Africa strengthen the shared responsibility model of human rights protection, where the state, constitutional institutions, civil society, and ordinary citizens all play meaningful roles in safeguarding constitutional values? So that's the question I'm posing to the whole panel. Do you want me to repeat it? In your view, how can South Africa strengthen the shared responsibility model of human rights protection, where the state, constitutional institutions, civil society, and ordinary citizens all play meaningful roles in safeguarding constitutional values? Sorry, I need two hands to operate here. Then I've got a question that I want to pose specifically to the Public Service Commission. I want to ask, the Constitution places a significant responsibility on the public administration, and Section 195 requires us to uphold, or the state to uphold, democratic values and principles such as accountability, transparency, and responsiveness. From the perspective of the Public Service Commission, how effectively is the public service fulfilling its constitutional obligation to promote and protect human rights in the delivery of public services, and what reforms are still needed to ensure that state institutions remain accountable to people? So that's the question I would like you to additionally also answer. Then to the Gender Commission, gender equality is a core constitutional value and remains central to the human rights framework in South Africa. Despite the constitutional commitment to equality, gender-based violence and structural discrimination remain widespread. From the standpoint of the Commission for Gender Equality, what are the key institutional and societal barriers that continue to undermine gender justice? So that's what are the key institutional and societal barriers? And how can the state, communities, and individuals collectively strengthen the protection of women's rights? And then to Prof. Poko, behind me, sorry. Universities play a critical role in shaping democratic values and human rights consciousness. From the perspective of the UNESCO Chair in Human Rights, what role should universities play in cultivating a culture of constitutionalism and human rights awareness, particularly among young people? And how can academic institutions work more closely with state bodies and communities to advance human rights education? Okay, so over to you. If you can just, maybe if we can start from the left, and then if you can each just touch on the questions I've asked, and then we can open it up later to questions from the floor as well. Thank you.
Thank you for the difficult questions. First of all, you mentioned a shared model that has to be shared. I didn't capture the whole question, but I think the essence of the question, how do we strengthen this democracy through the Constitution in a model that would be shared amongst ourselves? Fortunately, I've already alluded to the memorandum of understanding that we as institutions supporting democracy have signed. We're right here at Garden Court with the legislature of the Eastern Cape, where we all pledge that agreement. But what's more important is the actions that we take, the program of action that we undertake jointly. Like I've made an example right now, there's a list of maladministration in one of the departments of the province. Auditor General is part of our investigation. We actually established a commission of inquiry, multi-pronged approach to deal with such issues. But another leg is that we report to the legislature. Public Service Commission has got what is called Section 196 report that we put to the legislature every year. Plus, with the legislature, we also have portfolio committees. We serve in those committees. We have established a relationship with because legislature is of public representatives. So we get invited there. Before they call a department for oversight, they will give us an opportunity. Say, what are the issues about this department? and we give them the whole analysis of how is that department performing in terms of service delivery, in terms of maladministration, in terms of labor issues, in terms of corruption, in terms of financial misconduct. So that when then the department comes, the public representatives themselves, together with us, are able to engage department and have findings that go to the House, which is Parliament, and they are recorded as House resolutions. So that's how then they manage to take these institutions seriously because of that. But on top of that, we engage the media. Once we have got a resolution, the findings, for example, in our annual report that we are tabling on the 25th of March, we've invited the media to come so that they can publish these stories, especially of maladministration, corruption, and stuff like that, so that people know, the public know that there is something wrong that's happening, there must be a follow-up. But also can I get to my second question? Okay. You asked me about our responsiveness in terms of constitutional values and principles as enshrined in section 195 of the Constitution. One example is that we have what we call a citizens forum. Would identify a place that has poor service delivery, especially the rural areas. We were at Tata Beach last year. This year, coming financial year, we're going to a place here in Kobokobo, Kiskamahuk, called as Ngondogeni, where there's poor roads, no water, poor schooling transport, no bridge. Many, many things are happening in that place called as Ngondogeni. Those who know Xhosa will know what Ngondoga is. That is the name of the place. It's not only how it appears. So there we call all the departments. Water affairs has been invited, home affairs. Other people don't even have IDs or let alone birth certificate for some children. We call all the departments, water affairs, education, health, all relevant departments that has to address such problems. We engage and they make public commitment. In fact, there is a research that we do first, even before we go, send it to all the departments so that when they go there delivering the services on wheels, SASA, blah, 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 and all that. So those are the kind of ways that we respond. But as I've said in my introduction here, that we also do an own accord investigation because we live amongst the people, we know the problems. We saw toilets there in Mount Elif built on the road, toilets alone, no house, no nothing. So we follow up on those things. Which money has been used? What was it used for? What is the plan of these things? And home affairs, when we see queues, Toranginza, people sleeping on the floor, we also respond to such issues, make findings, call the department. We even engaged the national department, the minister, in cases where we're not getting joy from local department. But let me leave it for my colleague, let me not exhaust all the answers.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll be brief. At least I didn't have a special question. Okay, my contribution would be that I think the biggest elephant in the room is a promise that lacks commitment. We promise, but we lack commitments. And we have got beautiful structures and forums that we have, but all those structures lack enforcement mechanisms and implementation mechanism. A typical example would be that, for example, for your governance, we say we've got this beautiful word where we say we've got corporate governance, where all the departments, all the sector departments, public institutions will meet, they explain their plans, the other explains their challenges, and in this platform, we just discuss those issues. There is no implementation, no enforcement, and no way forward. I think if we could have this legislation of corporate governance implemented and to include a feature that will enforce areas and concerns that have been identified to say that there's a problem with the Department of Health, it's not delivering due to electricity issues. What does ESCOM do? They cannot come and present that there's a challenge and there's no solution that is brought forward. Then it means that corporate governance is not effective and it's not progressive. So if we do have corporate governance, we do have intergovernmental relations where we say the municipalities must come on board, government departments must come on board, sector departments must come on board. We share our annual plans, share our challenges, and we all know that democracy does not operate in isolation. So one department can be affected by the other. We present those things, but no implementation is done, no monitoring is done until we go to the next meeting and we again raise the same issues. So I think if we can have an implementation mechanism that is infused into the corporate legislation, corporate governance legislation, so that there is effective implementation and enforcement. And another issue I think that is glaring, maybe I'm glad that we are in a room that is full of legal scholars. I think the issue of oversight is not done properly. Reason being, I cannot be a member of parliament and heading a department and then be expected to implement proper oversight. I think in South Africa we need a proper debate on the issue of separation of powers, because somewhere along the line there's no definite separation of powers. The legislative body, the executive body, the one overlaps over the other. The only definite one that we can see is the judiciary. But if you are heading a department, there's issues of maladministration in your department. You go, you sit in parliament, you are the same person who is going to be executing oversight. Will there be justice when it comes to that oversight? Absolutely not.
Thanks, Program Director, for the question around the strengthening of shared responsibility model. I think when the grafters were drafting the Constitution first, they made it sure that there are institutions or state institutions, which we call Chapter 9, so that we safeguard the rights that are enshrined in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution. And there is something that cut across to all of us, is that if a matter does not fall within the mandate of the CGE, I have a duty as a commission to refer it to other sister Chapter 9 organizations or other organs of state to deal with that matter. I would not turn away a citizen to say, look, this matter is not falling within my mandate. I'm supposed to refer that matter either to Public Service Commission, to Public Protector, or to the South African Human Rights Commission. I think that's a model that they created to make sure that there's a synergy amongst us as respective institutions that support constitutional democracy. Now, on the issue that you raise around gender, what are the key drivers of gender justice inequality? In South Africa, one of the issues that we observe, it is also articulated on the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, is the issue of poverty. Most women, I would say, in South Africa, they are the face of poverty. In what we term in social science, poverty has been feminized. Where you find the face of poverty in South Africa, the majority of people, it's women, which then perpetuates the issues around gender inequality. Again, we are in a country where we have systems of authority, in particular in the province of the Eastern Cape, which is the patriarchy. Patriarchy, if it's toxic, then it leads to further perpetuation of gender-based violence and further perpetuation of inequalities. There are instances where men, we call it, they have inheritance rights by birth. Because you are a man, you know that Nozipho will have to leave this house some way, some other way. I'm the one that is going to take over the ownership of the property. Not only the ownership of the property, but also the ownership of the land, Intsimi. Intsimi, in our tradition, is transferred from in the form of an adult man from your forefather to your elder son and then to your grandson. It goes like that. Then again, it then perpetuates the issue of access to land by women, the issue of tenure rights that they might not have, and again, the issue of them not being able to secure any lending because they can't place something that will say, I have this particular land which I have, which I can place to borrow certain money to the bank. Then there is an issue of gender-based violence, which the president has declared as one of the issues as a pandemic. But in declaring the gender-based violence, we need to move away from the statements to action, because it's something else to declare and not put the resources. So we need to check as a Gender Commission, does that statement that the president has said goes with a commitment of resources? Because currently we are faced with the police stations that are incapacitated, that have lack of resources in terms of the pools of crate, your vehicles. When you engage with SAPS, they will tell you we can't go to the areas of Lusidisik and police because the buckets that are provided to us is NP200 buckets. So it defeats the main reason that you want to address gender-based violence, but we are also again not giving the adequate resources. So the issue of GBV is one of the key drivers of gender inequality, as well as the issue of how we are raised as men in general. If we tolerate the insensitive language towards women and girls and LGBTIQ community, and then as men we don't condemn such act, we are party to the act of violence when we are party to the act of perpetuating gender-based violence. But again, it's an issue of people not using the available resources at their disposal, at their best. You're supposed first to go to the matter of GBV, you report to SAPS. If you don't get a joy to SAPS, you will definitely have to escalate it to these institutions that are in front of you, so that you know where you're gonna get the recourse to address that particular matter. If SAPS, you are arrested, and then you find yourself, you are again secondary being victimized while you are still in the SAPS by sexual abuse by a member of SAPS, and you keep quiet about it, then which means the next person that gets arrested, the same member is going to do the same to that person. So which then means we need to act, we need to not to be silent, but to report and issues of GBV and issues of gender discrimination that are affecting our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, not to misquote your question, the state is not only the one that is bearing the duties to enhance or promote human rights, but individuals, communities, and so on. So how can these shared responsibilities be sort of shared equally amongst the people? Well, my first response, Chair, would be that the state is the primary bearer of responsibilities to ensure that human rights are given effect to. Then within those rights, the receiver of rights or beneficiaries of those rights also to a certain extent have obligations to ensure that whilst they enjoy those rights, other human rights are not infringed in the process. So how can we enhance a sort of these shared responsibilities? I think to answer that question to me, Madam Chair, would be to first ask whether liberal democracy does work for us. In other words, has this concept of democracy been instilled to the extent that every stakeholder is aware of what to do? And if not, what should we do? Madam Chair, I ask this question to myself and the audience as well. If you look at all liberal or modern democracies, especially starting from Latin America and Asia, when they started in the 1960s, 70s, and going on, they were no different than South Africa, to the extent that in the early stages of our democracy, we were all clapping. Good institutions, sort of leaders who were tasked with the responsibilities to give effect to these rights that we have in our so-called a very progressive constitution. Fast forward in Asia and Latin America, today we have experienced democratic decline. The citizens are not happy. Institutions are collapsing. The same that is happening in our country. So I think to answer that question would be that the youth must take an active role to hold the government accountable. In all these continents I've mentioned to, Asia, Latin America, and even coming to Africa, the majority of the leaders who are supposed to be providing leadership, they far supersede the number of youth representatives in all leadership and strategic positions. So if this responsibility or leadership roles are not shared equally, we are going to see a dissatisfaction, and that will result to many, injustices. We can take the example of the Gen Z uprisings in Kenya, wherein the youth was at the forefront. The recently established Sahel states, wherein the citizens have opted to embrace coup d'etats, unconstitutional change of government, because they see them as the rescuer to this democratic process, which does not yield the shared or rather the promised responsibilities. So in conclusion to this question, my answer is that there must be a collaborative approach between the leaders and citizens. Non-governmental organizations must also come on board. Chapter 9 institutions, which at times, it creates a certain challenges for me because of many overlapping responsibilities. My former panelist on my right here mentioned, the issue of jurisdiction. This is where you see that the complexities and the shared responsibility sort of creates this bureaucracy. Then once all these stakeholders have come together, we can ensure that the issue of accountability and transparency is enforced. Let's go to Singapore. You commit crime with good institutions, you know what the punishment is. The same thing, you go to China, you commit corruption and so on, you know what will follow. So we have institutions, which I believe so. We have people, but we are going towards what is called, a democratic decline because of lack of accountability and transparency. The last question, if I may attempt to answer it, what is the role of institutions of higher learning, including communities, to ensure that they instill or they empower their clients with the necessary tools to advocate or protect human rights? I think collaborations such as this are a platform for us to undergo that process. But as institutions are engineers of knowledge production, the way we teach our students, we should also include an element of experiential learning so that when they live here, they not only have a theory, but the necessary practical knowledge so that when they go and join the Chapter 9 institutions and so on, at least to a limited extent, they have the exposure that is required. But not only that, universities should empower students. The ordinary people that you meet when you walk around the streets should also be role players, because if we were to make a mistake of advocating about the responsibilities and rights whilst excluding those who are less fortunate, then I think we'll be shooting ourselves in the foot. And we know the result of the population that is unhealthy, countless protests and so on. I pause there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof, and all the other panel members. Prof Poko and myself are looking at each other through leaves here, but I am hearing you loud and clear. And I think with you actually made my job easier because with your first answer, you posed a question. And I would like the other panel members to also reflect on that question if you want to. And then later we can also open it up to the audience and the students. So that's the first question I would then want to pose again to all panel members if you want to answer that question. And then specifically, so let's get to the first question. It was about liberal democracy. I think if I got you correctly, you said, is it still serving our purpose? The purpose of enhancing and realizing human rights in South Africa is liberal democracy serving that purpose? If not, what can we done? Did I get you correctly on that one? So I would like the other panel members to touch on that. And then the other question I want to ask you is to be very practical. We've all said, and you've all said this morning, how everyone needs to be involved, how we've got duties. Dr. Carter explained about responsibility, constitutional duties, constitutional responsibilities. I want you to each, from your perspective, from your institution, from your chair, to tell me what are the constitutional duties in terms of academically, Prof. Poko, the students, myself as an academic, what are my duties, constitutional duties? In terms of gender equality, what are our duties towards each other? Students, academics, the institution, tell us about our duties. Also in terms of voting and elections, what are our constitutional duties? Not just the rights, but what are our duties? And then also in terms of institutions, reporting, you also talked about the media. That was interesting. I mean, they also have a very important role to play. So what are the duties in terms of reporting and highlighting problems? If you can, in a practical way, talk to myself as an academic and the students and explain our duties, and then also touch on liberal democracy. Is it still serving our purpose? If you say yes, why? If not, what can we do? Thank you. Any order. You don't have to go in that line, but any order. Thank you.
Yeah, it looks like a rugby ball. Thank you very much, facilitator. When it comes to Public Service Commission, and I'm sure it applies to other institutions supporting democracy, the issue mentioned initially, the shared model, is what can actually work. There is no one instituting the solutions to the society and to the community. For example, you just mentioned now the issue of responsibility and reporting. We have a duty, all of us collectively, to empower and educate our public. I'll make an example about the case at hand, which is the selling of documents by Home Affairs. The issue of unlicensed foreign national is a serious issue. One, the cause is corruption. The second cause is lack of patriotism. But collectively as citizens is public education. Because people do not know the value. Somebody spoke about the citizenship here. People do not know what it means to be a South African citizen. Let alone even not knowing that Venda is actually part of South Africa and Lesotho is another country. Those are practical things. I've worked with the Department of Safety. I've been going around. If you go to Matatiele, Mount Fletcher, the Stekspruit, the towns at the borders, literally, you'll have South African kids studying in a Lesotho school because it's nearer than the South. They only realize when it gets to about grade 8 that no, actually, I'm in another country. Because they intermarry those people, they are neighbors. There are even small rivers there. Kids play, they say, I'm in Lesotho, I'm in South Africa, I'm in Lesotho, I'm in South Africa. We need education. People sell their IDs, their faces to give a foreigner a passport. Said, I don't need a passport, I've got an ID. And you see, this really needs education. And the second level is patriotism for those who know. And then there's a blatant corruption where I think we need to have a serious sentences. And then also collaborating with legislature. I find it very, very helpful in terms of being responsive to these issues, because legislature, every year, it has got what is called People's Assembly in an identified district within the province, where all citizens are actually invited, not only invited, but they are allowed to speak, and resolutions are taken there for a way forward to bring solutions to our people, and they are measured in terms of that. I don't want to go back and talk about the citizen forums, which I've already spoken about, but also the issue of not taking Constitution seriously. People don't know that there will be consequences. It's another issue. I think it's a challenge for us that if there is an investigation, there are recommendations, they are not implemented, we must proceed with subpoenaing, we must proceed with laying criminal offense or even issuing a fine. An official of government must go to prison for not responding to what the citizens are looking for. Thank you very much.
Okay, is liberal democracy still the right method of political management? Definitely yes. However, I think what is eroding democracy at the moment are power politics. For example, the Washington Consensus, it was introduced to us by the Western Bloc. They introduced to us all the principles of civilization, but the first people also that said, no, there must be a proliferation of nuclear weapons and development of weapons. But who has the biggest weapons in the world? Who's doing all the attacks on all those vulnerable groups? So I think liberal democracy as a concept is absolutely beautiful. The only thing that lacks is implementation and earnest commitment to what these values and these principles represent. At a more domestic level, for example, as the IEC, we conduct research into democratization and just to assess what's the mood of the citizens. Are they happy with democracy? Are they not happy with democracy? Is there an alternative? And if yes, which method of governance do they prefer? And to your surprise, you will find that 80% to 90% of South African citizens prefer a democracy, according to the research by the Human Science Research Council. But the level of service delivery is what discourages them. It is what makes them to actually vent their frustrations and to say, this system is not working. But if you say to them, which other form of governance would you prefer? It's nothing else but democracy. So are we saying that liberal democracy is still the best form of governance? Definitely yes. However, we need now not to put the rules, the processes, the forums and the platforms of conflict and irregularities as just monumental values, but we need to implement and to execute so that there's effective change and progress for all South Africans and all citizens. And then when it comes to the issue of practicality in terms of the civic rights and the civic responsibilities. Well, as the IEC, we normally conduct what we call civic and democracy education. That is where we engage the public on their civic rights and their civic responsibilities. And it's difficult to speak on civic democracy when you don't want, without touching on the issues of service delivery. Because in essence, what will it determine a willing participant and an unwilling participant? It's results. And those results is that, do you have water? Do you have access to facilities? Do you have access to universities? And all those issues come to public service delivery issues. So when it comes to the rights and the responsibilities, I think this one, one of the opening remarks was that students that were once part of Forte, the alumni of Forte, ancestral and those that are still living, they made it a personal obligation not to only study and just leave their academic contributions on a piece of paper, but to actually practicalize it so that they can see the change for the betterment of everyone. So what we need to do also as students and fellow citizens and as the youth is to understand that the legacy of democracy is vague and it's not going to yield any results when we lack the participation from the youth. The legacy of a democracy relies and it is solely dependent on the youth participation. And for us to have a meaningful way of saying, because sometimes you would find that when you go to a group of students or ordinary communities and you ask them, what is the importance of voting? You know, the room becomes silent. Do you know why it is important to get education? You know, with the young ones, and they would all quickly raise their hands because they know why it is important to get education. But to vote, then they don't attach any meaning or any value to that. And I think one of the issues or one of the problems that we have as a society is the lack of willingness to actually get the information ourselves so that we can empower ourselves. The state entities, the NGOs, the NPOs, the different movement and social organizations, they are all there, but we don't utilize them to empower ourselves and to add meaning and value to our own selves as the young citizens of the country. A typical example is that there is a lot of uncertainty. Like if I would ask the room right now, if you voted the previous elections, how many of you actually went through the different political party manifestos? Who read through the manifestos? You see? So, okay. All right. Okay, so not so many of us. So it means that we go to the voting polls with not even understanding what is it that these people are promising us. How are you going to measure their performance? How are you going to hold them to account if in the first instance you don't know what they stand for? And then, if there's a lot of vacuum and uncertainty, how are they going to then in return do what we want from them if they too can say, well, they also don't know what they want, so let's all sound the same. Have you ever seen an election when all the parties are campaigning? They all sound the same. Have you ever noticed that? They all sound the same. So it's a strategy, it's a political game to try and confuse us so that they can all sound as if they are going to give to us what we want. Sometimes they even employ ambiguous language, big bombastic words, but they don't have any meaning to them. So we as the young people, as educated as we are, how do we let them go with such? How? So we need to take the onus upon our own selves. Yes, we've got these rights, but these rights are being undermined. They've been taken away from us just in front of us, without us doing anything. Let's hold them to account. Let's read, let's understand, and let's be able to position ourselves so that the democracy that we say we have, the rights that we say we have, can work for us.
For me, it's whether liberal democracy is working for us. I want to align myself with the previous speakers that it does work for us. But the issue is the weakening of the institutions of the state that are supposedly to hold the duty bearers accountable. Now, one speaker said we are a country on an autopilot. We like surprises. These things are happening under our watch. The corruption is happening under our watch. Then we react by forming a commission after commission. Zondo Commission, whatever commission, Kampempe Commission. It's like a country that is on an autopilot, which does not seem, there is a vacuum, let me put it that way. That needs to be addressed. While we do have the institutions of the state to hold the duty bearers accountable. So for me, democracy, liberal democracy does work in that sense because everything in South Africa now is transparent. Unlike previously, where you will not know that so-and-so has 2 billion that he has charged for a certain hospital. It will have been put under carpet. But if it was another form of governance, you will not have seen such a transparency. But the issue is a weakening of the institutions of the state to hold the duty bearers accountable. But democracy on its own, I don't want to falter it, and the way that we're being governed, I don't want to falter it, but I just want to say it's an accountability point of, it's on a accountability point of view, where duty bearers might have taken their eyes away from the real issues that are confronting our communities. Now, on the last question about the academic and the student, first, the institutions of higher learning are a microcosm of society. They are a microcosm of society. We look to the institutions of higher learning to give us well-researched information, well-informed data on issues that affects our communities. That's how I see the value in terms of the academic that they should place themselves in making sure that we address what is currently facing us as a country. If unemployment is an issue and the issue has to do with the skills that are provided at the basic level of education, the institutions of finance should be able to direct us and say, look, now we are coming up with another thing, Premier of Gauteng, of that student must learn Swahili, they must learn Mandarin, but we as a citizen or our institutions of higher learning, we are of a view that the best way to address these issues, this is a form of education that we want that will direct the country and take the country forward. So hence I'm saying the institutions of higher learning are a macrocosm of society. We rely on them. They draw, the students from the universities are coming from the different communities, urban setting, farming communities, rural communities. We expect that once they are here as students, they get much knowledge and information as possible. That could only be done through these institutions of higher learning. We were pleased as a Gender Commission when the University of KwaZulu-Natal actually said, they declare that each and every first-year student that enroll in that university, it's compulsory, they will do a gender course. So that these various growing up, socialization of these students from different communities, they can unlearn them once they are in the institution and taught the right curriculum around gender issues. So we were pleased with the university when it pronounced that it's compulsory that all students that are enrolling for the first year, they are going to do a gender and a human rights course. It's non-negotiable, so that you deal away with the myths that they have been taught over the years while they were still staying with their communities. I think that's a role that the academic should play. While we expect students to challenge. One lecturer of mine used to say, don't be a sponge. When you put a sponge in a liquid, it takes the whole thing. You need to be a filtrate. Once they are here, they need to be able to analyze what is going on. That is what we expect them. And we expect good citizens after they come out of the institutions of higher learning. And we expect them to be the next layer of leadership. But that could only happen if they are given the right tools whilst they are still here at the institutions of higher learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think on the issue of whether liberal democracy is working or not, I will be very slow to confidently say it is working. Perhaps my quick answer would be there are some elements or good practices that we can take from that. And perhaps as South Africa, we can reimagine a new concept of democracy. On what that concept would be, I was hoping that the national dialogue, was going to produce tangible results, but it ended up going on its own direction. Why am I reluctant to say this model of democracy is working? Madam Chair, I've studied at least about 20 countries in Africa alone to assess the progress and failures of liberal democracy. And I couldn't find at least a single country since their transition into liberal democracy that is still on a sort of uprising on what they achieved or had hoped to carry on when they transitioned from, the autocratic rules. A good example would be, this country is escaping my mind, but the leader was Gaddafi, Libya. If you look at the Libya model, one couldn't classify it as a liberal democracy, but at least there were social services to the citizens. Whether everyone was happy or not, it's not a debate for today. We go to countries that sort of brought this concept of liberal democracy. What are they doing today? I doubt that we can confidently say they are all doing good, especially towards Africa. So, to me, a reimagined democracy will be the one with good institutions like ours, good service delivery, not more than 15 cabinet ministers who are employed on a daily basis while the ordinary citizens and students are struggling in higher education. So is basic education. A liberal democracy, to me, is where the government responds promptly to the needs of those who are most vulnerable in our societies. I don't want to go to examples about the state of affairs in the Eastern Cape province alone. Maybe I pause there not to give a lecture on liberal democracy. But on the last question, as educators in institutions of higher learning, ours is to constantly, impart the importance of human rights, balanced gender roles within our students, with the hope that tomorrow they will go back to their own communities, the global world, and become the ambassadors of human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I must say, thank you so much for your answers. I learned a lot, and I think you really gave those practical answers. And I think for the students, like if I can just say what I've learned, if you go to Home Affairs, or if you are aware of corruption, if you go to the traffic department and somebody's trying to sell you a learner's license, then it needs to be reported. It's our constitutional duty. What I really liked, what I heard, because us as lecturers, we always tell our students to read, how important it is to read, no? So what I've learned this morning, just now, is that it is your constitutional duty to read. What do you need to read? Who can tell me? Did you listen? Before an election, what must you read? The manifestos. You must read it. It's your constitutional duty. Good, thank you. I also heard that it's your duty to think critically, to not just absorb everything we are saying. You must think and challenge. So thank you for that. And I really like the example of UKZN and what they're doing. I think that's a great example to us as an institution as well. Thank you so much. Before I hand over to the floor for questions, I am mindful of time. if I can quickly, like in 30 seconds, ask each of you to just identify, if you can identify one key challenge. If there's one institutional reform, one key institutional reform that you can fix like that and say, if we do that, that will really improve the realization of human rights, what would that be? One reform, only one. So if you can quickly think of that, if you've got one, to give a brief answer, and after that is the floor's time to pose questions to the panel. Thank you. What key reform?
Well, I think one reform would be to strengthen our institutions, especially the criminal justice system, to enhance the level of accountability and consequences for those who are found, to be on the other side. Thank you.
Definitely, thank you.
I think for me it will be the issue of specialization. We are faced with a challenge where people are absorbed, like left and center, but there's no specific issue of that, say this one is specialized on this. And if we could institute that in the public service, that there is an specialization, it becomes a key in every sector of public service. And also closing the accountability.
Thank you.
Okay, my take on institutional reform is for us to address the issue of separation of powers. Politicians must remain in parliament. The executive, like my fellow colleague is saying, specialization. I cannot come with a degree in engineering and head the Department of Health, for example. So there we need a specialist, someone that is a professional and expertise of the department to lead as a minister and not a politician. Politicians must stay in parliament so that they can be able to implement oversight. The executive, we get professionals that are skilled experts in that field to lead the departments, and then at least the judiciary is doing good in their field. So separation of powers must be looked into, reviewed, so that there's actual implementation of those three. If you look at the Madlanga Commission, you look at the state capture, you will see that if we had an effective and a definite separation between those bodies, we wouldn't be having so much corruption issues.
Thank you, facilitator. For me, I think the key issue, if we can have what's called active citizenry, zero tolerance from ordinary people. Whoever government or institution, criminal justice system, everyone knows that if a citizen of South Africa see me doing this, is going to make a hell of a noise. If we can have that impatience, we become tired of being sick and tired, and then we'll be able to overcome these problems.
Thank you. Thank you so much, panelists. I must say that you gave powerful answers, 4 very different but 4 very powerful answers. I do appreciate that. I am mindful of time. We are supposed to close at 1, but I do want to give the opportunity to the floor and to students for questions. So I'm going to take 3 hands, and then if you ask your question, please clearly state to which panel member or whether you want all of them to answer, and try and keep your questions short, like understandable, not long-winded like my questions, short. Okay, hands, I see one there. Oh, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mondekazi Ntshele. I work at the Faculty of Law, but I will speak as a citizen and a community member. So my question is directed to Mr. Mapolisa and Usisi from IEC. And I will quote from what President Ramaphosa said on the 11th on the 114th annual anniversary they had for ANC, he spoke about the cutting of illegal electricity, and I think that's the one elephant that we don't really confront, illegal connection of electricity, especially in rural areas, as Lalini. And that is intersection to the human rights of people and also the road infrastructure that we face as Lalini Zetu. And I wanted to ask from you, Dada, that what is the role of the Public Services Commission in that regard, and whether is there any work that you are doing towards fixing that kind of a problem? Sisi, I want to ask you, in terms of one of the aspects that Ramaphosa also mentioned was the denomination, or rather disregarding the local ward councillor that are not effective as part of our community leaders. And so I want to ask you in terms of the work that you are doing at the IEC, what is your role to engage the public and the citizens of our communities and our villages to ensure that they actually understand what they are doing and they actually understand what their leaders are supposed to do, right? The last question is based on the Gen Z social mobilization of movement building. I was privileged that I was in Kenya at the time the Gen Z uprising was there. And I wanted to ask from you, Sisi, that what is the role of IEC again to ensure that the movement building of the youth in South Africa is effective in terms of trying to build activism for human rights, not just only on social media, but you ensure that the movement building that we're trying to build as the youth is effective enough? Thank you.
Greetings again, Young Ambangata speaking. My question is directed to the representative from Public Services, I think. My question is, as you said, this is the time for hard questions. In your term in office, is there anyone that has been held accountable? By being held accountable, I mean, is there any arrests that have been made? Because you mentioned quite a few cases about malpractices being found in municipalities and other institutions. So in your time in office, has anyone been arrested? Because you'll find that when you talk about malpractice, you are talking about corruption. And you talk about corruption, you'll find fraud, you'll find theft there, and those are crimes, and people ought to be arrested for such. Then I'll move on to Gender Equality Commission. My question there is, are you aware of, number one, and if you are aware, how do you deal with the misrepresentation of the message of gender equality? Because you'll find that oftentimes there is a misrepresentation that women empowerment means the pulling down of men. You'll find that if 10 men are, this is a question, if 10 men are employed, then you want equality. Then it means that 10 women have to be now employed. Now, if that means that the 10, out of the 10, 5 have to be removed, where are they channeled to? So those are my questions. These are things that are critical. In practice, they mean a lot of things. So another question I have is, do you as the commission have an appreciation of the differences between the male and the female? And if you do have that appreciation, is that now considered when policy recommendations are made? Then lastly, my question to I think it's the IEC. I think I'm partially captured by, I think it's Mr. Puku, when he talked about liberal democracy. Because my question is, when it comes to democracy and voting, it's under the impression that everyone has a right to vote. Everyone has a right to self-determination, which is to set up their own economic and social constructs. Now, my question is, every right is not, all rights are not absolute. There are limitations. Now, when you look at South Africa, our reality is that I think it's 10.2% of our country is illiterate. That means millions of voters cannot read and do not have the comprehension skills to understand when they're reading a manifesto, they don't get what is being said. So my question was kind of, do you consider that when you're saying that liberal democracy is something that we should have? Because when a principal is going to be hired, professionals will understand what that principal is supposed to do, what qualifications are needed for him to be able to function as a principal are set up. And that's why you find that many places, people who are qualified get the job. Now, in South Africa, we have had a president who was uneducated because the political noise drove the people who
who are, as I said, millions of them are uneducated and they voted. So do you take such into consideration when you talk about liberal? So thank you.
Hello, my name is Abongile Stofile, and I have two questions. My question is to the Commission on Gender Equality. He did speak on the fact that we are expected as higher education students to question norms and question things that we've been taught, right? But I think we can all agree that the gender equality is nuanced in the sense that patriarchy forms a part of our everyday life, right? So I want to ask, do you think that, first of all, primary education or early education is a powerful tool in instilling values in our youth? Do you also think that our current education does a good job on holistically and effectively instilling values of gender equality? And if not so, what is the Commission doing in order to reform that? And then also, I wanted a representative of the IEC in what my colleague raised, in the fact that the youth is losing confidence in our politicians. We are finding out around elections that politicians are being sponsored and they are forwarding, the interests of these private institutions. What do you say to someone who thinks that the independence of the IEC is irrelevant if our actual politics are captured by these private institutions?
Thank you. Thank you so much to the students. Clearly, I can see there are so many of you with questions. I think we need a whole day where we just do this and give you the mic and the opportunity to ask questions, because I can see you've got a lot. Thank you for participating and for being here. It's really, it's heartwarming to see how important this is to you and how you are participating, so I really appreciate it. I'm going to give the opportunity to the panelists to briefly answer the questions that was just posed to you, and then after that I'm going to hand over to Dr. Carter for the reflection and closing. Unfortunately, we are limited by time. I would have loved for this discussion to have gone on and on. I think we are all enjoying it, but yeah, if you can just briefly answer, and then we will do reflection and closing. Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot the mic is with me. Monica asked about the issue of stealing of cables and theft and stuff like that. It is a serious problem in the country. There is a forum called criminal, what's this, JCPS. It's a criminal justice cluster where they deal with these issues and we report these matters to them. They've already started working on those issues by closing the scrap metal shops. Because the problem is that there's demand for these copper wires and cables and stuff like that. And if you just chase these people, you may not really deal with the issue. They've got a strategy, a provincial strategy on dealing with quite a number of crimes, but one of the objectives is ferrous and non-ferrous metals that they are dealing with. They have started now closing these shops, or even inspecting those that are illegal, because there are those that are trading illegally. But it is a problem, and we can only work with the police and the criminal justice system in trying to identify and deal with these problems. Ayanda asked about the issue of anyone being arrested. We as Public Service Commission, we do not arrest, but we make findings, and direct recommendations to the executive authority, that is the Premier or the MEC. But in cases that we have made serious findings, you'll be surprised how probably you as law students you should really help us with this issue. You have a finding, you direct that disciplinary action must be taken against this official. One in another department, he actually got a protection order and interdicted the MEC from implementing the recommendation of the Public Service Commission. That matter is in court now in Grahamstown. It's 4 years. 4 years. So people have mastered on how to maneuver legal and court processes. Others, they are in disciplinary hearing. They will submit sick leave certificates, change presiding officers, change employer rep, and the matter will drag and drag and drag forever. But to answer your question, we do not arrest ourselves. We make recommendations to executive authority. We only take criminal action when we summon you and you do not come as a senior manager. Then that one we can, but so long people decide to respond in the last minute. Those were 2 questions to me.
Thank you, Commissioner. Greetings to the House at large once again. Okay. The first 2 speakers asked questions that were a little bit similar to one another, so I'll try to address these at once. Okay, what is the role of the IEC in terms of knowledge dissemination, empowering voters so that they make informed decisions, so that they understand the processes? We have a responsibility of conducting civic and democracy education, where we explain to the people, you have 3 ballots that, for example, in the local government elections you are going to receive. What does this ballot represent? The first represents your ward councillor. This person is going to be representing you at a ward level. Then you've got your second ballot. That's your PR. Now, what powers does this ballot paper hold? In that ballot paper, you are selecting the person who is going to be managing your municipality. The office of the speaker, the person who's going to be the speaker, the person who's going to be the mayor, comes from that PR ballot. And then you've got the third type of a ballot, which is your regional representatives, where you are choosing someone who's going to now represent you at a district level. So that's your district ballot. So what kind of education is that? That is our balloting education, but at the same time, it's tied with a bit of civic democracy, so that you understand what power does this single vote of mine have. Because sometimes one person will say that there's 20 of us or more than 100 of us in this room. So what difference is my single vote going to make? I might as well stay away. Now imagine if the next person close to you holds the same perspectives, and then the next one. What happens in that situation is that whether you go to vote or you don't, the selected 5 or 10 will make a choice, and those elections will be deemed credible, and they will count. So if you don't vote, those 5 people will make a decision on your behalf. So what are we saying when we go out there to do civic and democracy education? We engage you so that you understand exactly what power it is that you are appropriating to each ballot paper. What does it mean in terms of representation? And at the same time, they will have those community meetings. We extend ourselves to the ward committees to say that please invite the IEC so that we can form a part of your meetings and your discussions. And also in those platforms, we start doing our civic education where we explain the civic rights and the civic responsibility so that whenever you go out there and you place that X, it is coming from an informed perspective. And one other thing that I want to appreciate is that I love the fact that as young people, we do identify that patriarchy is necessary. I know that most of the time when we speak of patriarchy, we speak of a political association. No, not necessarily. Patriarchy means that you form organized groups where you engage amongst each other on what is important to you. What is important to you? Young people today are getting educated in South Africa. We've got NSFAS bursaries and all those things. But it's difficult to penetrate the system. Most of us are unemployed. Some of us even go overseas to be au pairs. And what do you do there? You become a childminder with a legal qualification, with a degree. So how do we then sit in these movements, or how do we sit in our silos and not do anything? Let's form organizations, social movements, where we speak of issues that are really burning and concerning us as the young people, so that we can go out there, speak power to what we need, so that those that are in positions of power, because one thing that we take for granted is that we think that the politicians don't care. They do actually. They read the election results. Whenever there is an election, the first thing that they want to see, they want to read those election results. Where did Party A get the most votes from? Which area? They want to read that. Which area did we receive less? Hey, these ones are not happy with us. So use that as your power. The ballot paper has so much power. If you are able now to determine governance through the ballot paper, teach them a lesson through the ballot paper. If they want to read, they will want now to meet your needs, because they want to know, why did we lose in this area? Why is it that they're not supporting us? Obviously, our shortcut ways of trying to garner or to rally favor is not working. These people want us to deliver. And guess what? They will deliver if you teach them a lesson, because it's an inner eta kind of a situation. But we as the young ones, we shy away and we sit away behind our social media platforms. And the social media is a good platform as well. And we as the IEC try to meet the young people in their social movements, so that we recognize that this is where we can find the young people. But it's difficult to reach out to people when they are not in an organized structure. Hence, it is easy for us to come to the universities and launch a tertiary institutions campaign. It is easy for us to go to a school and launch a school democracy program. It's easy because then we find the youth is organized in those setups, and we are able now to mobilize and to engage and to educate a big group. So we appreciate that the young people have these social movements, but let's take it to the next level so that it works for us. And let's be a part of these debates, national debates, similar to the one we have today. And if you want to have your meetings and you want to call the IEC, call us. It's a part of our outreach division for us to come and engage and to empower so that people can be informed. Call us, we will come, we will organize a meeting, and we will engage you and give you as much information as you need. Another issue that was raised was the issue of illiteracy versus understanding, having the cognitive abilities to apprehend or to comprehend what is being said. I appreciate what you are saying, but at the same time, let's not think that only the illiterate are affected by misinformation. AI is good for us, artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence is also impeding the democracy and its ethos, because there's a lot of misinformation there. So the IEC is engaged in what we call digitalized democracy, whereby we've got groups such as the Monitoring Group of Africa, where we are monitoring and sensitizing voters to say, no, this is not the correct information. I'm sure where you are sitting, you've received a lot of job alerts, and it was said, fake news, fake news. So we are also engaging in such platforms so that the information and the quality of information that is given out there to the voters and to the general public is indeed correct and accurate. And where there are people that are illiterate, even in our processes, we allow for someone to have someone that is going to accompany them at the voting station so that they understand, what does it mean when I'm going to put my X, where am I putting it? Someone that is illiterate, they are allowed to have somebody that is going to accompany them and explain the ballot paper to them. Also, when we are doing our voter educations, we also employ our outreach personnel and our deaf personnel. Those are the people that do door-to-doors, where now you don't have to be limited to a setup like this one, whereby sometimes someone can have an inferior complex and not be confident enough to raise a question because they don't feel confident in what they want to ask. So we do have door-to-door sessions where there can be a face-to-face intimate discussion between an IEC official to extend and better articulate so that the person gets thorough understanding. And we are not limited in terms of language. We try to extend ourselves. If we are in the Eastern Cape, we will try to find people that are from that local area so that no one is disadvantaged. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, much appreciated. The question whether do we appreciate the difference between men and women. The Commission does appreciate the differences between men and women. But I must indicate to say, if I may have come out as being representing women, no. I'm coming from the Gender Commission, which then means it represents all genders, irrespective of whether you are a man, you are a female, or you are from the LGBTIQ person. We represent the interests of all those people, that they should not be discriminated on the basis of their gender. But also we need to take into cognizance that there are laws in the country which seeks to promote those that were marginalized within the employment sector, or within the public health, or within education. You will find within the employment, cut across public service, private sector, there is a law that is called Employment Equity Act. We can't turn a blind eye to that law because it refers to the previous disadvantage, and it then said women, persons with disabilities, and then Africans. So when we do what we call transformation in institutions of higher learning, public hearings, and holding the VCs to account, we want to see whether these voices of women are represented in senior management position as per the Employment Equity Act. Are persons with disability represented irrespective of their gender? But also we want to see, is there a conducive environment? Is the environment conducive in these institutions? There is no perpetuation of gender inequality, or there is no perpetuation that will lead to gender discrimination. That's how we do our work as a CG. We do acknowledge the differences between men and women. But again, we are saying women must lead their own struggle. They are the ones that face these challenges. Men, we could support what women are advocating for. We are supporters of acting against GBV. Don't be silent. We want such men. But we are not saying take the struggle of women and lead them. Women should lead their own struggle. As men, you will lead your own struggle that you encounter. The issue around primary education and the values, whether it installs good values into our children. There is a report by the Gender Commission. The report by the research department, it looked at interplay and the dropout of girls during pregnancy. The interplay and the dropout of girls during pregnancy in basic education. Now, in basic education, there are differences. Some of the schools they follow certain methods of teaching. They follow religion, for an example. So if you come to such schools, you want to address the issues of sex, you will find there are differences and there are difficulties to work with people in such a set-up environment because they follow a certain principles within their education system. But the bottom line is, those principles that they follow, they should not infringe on the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution. Right to security of persons, right to human dignity, right to sexual and reproductive rights, and your inherent human rights. So if those rights then become infringed on the basis of you practicing certain form of education that you do not welcome LGBTIQ community in the school, then you will be then against the principles of the Constitution, what is enshrined in the Constitution. No one should be discriminated on the basis of sexual orientation. So in a nutshell, I will say there is an opportunity to educate those that are in a basic education around human rights, but there is also consultation of ideas, because our research indicates that some of the SGBs and some of the communities, they don't want to engage to children to be taught sex education. Part of sex education, it will interlink with gender and gender inequality. So that's how we do our work. We hope that, yes, certain values are being instilled in our children in basic education. But we need to safeguard and protect the rights that are enshrined in our constitutions, as I said, so that they are not discriminated, basically by the educators themselves or by the school. I know our colleagues from Human Rights have done a number of work around the issue of school uniform and how it intersects with the issue of the LGBTIQ learners in schools. And we are faced with the same challenge in a school here in East London, where a learner from that particular sector of the LGBTIQ was told that you are not welcome in this school if you are still going to come and wear a gym dress. We expect you as a boy to come and wear a trouser. So on the basis of that, that child is being discriminated. So we had to intervene as a gender commission. The interplay, yeah, sure. I think I refer to that report of the interplay and issues of intersectionality in the sector of basic education, where there is gender discrimination. We intervene as a gender commission. If there is any question that I may left out, you may remind me, Program Director. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Program Director. I think there was one question by the lady. I think it's an important one. She asked on the issue of the president. All right, so the question was, how do we as the IEC ensure that those that are in political office do not gain financial favors? And then so that they can award tenders and bids to those that donate to them. There is a Political Party Funding Act that guards against that corruption, whereby the IEC has got a responsibility of getting all the registered political parties to disclose the financial private donations that they are receiving from private individuals. So at the moment, we are receiving those disclosures to say that this person or this business has donated to my political party, and we need to put that out there so that we prevent a situation whereby somebody is getting certain funds, but in a bid to actually bargain for a tender or so forth. So we do have laws and policies that actually prevent or guard against the corrupt activities and bargains such as those.
Thank you very much for that. I want to call upon Dr. Carter to quickly do a closure.
All right, thank you so much. This has been very insightful. I wanted to touch on just one or two things that I heard. Commissioner, colleagues on the platform here, I do think what we are hearing is, to quote you, Commissioner, people are tired of being sick and tired. We are losing confidence. And I love the word, there needs to be arrests. We are looking for accountability. And I am inspired again by the vibrancy of the students in this room. And it also shows an escalation towards looking for the accountability that we so desperately need, not only for ourselves and rights realization here, but for the communities on the ground. So as we conclude, I want to return to the central idea of this lecture, that rights and responsibilities are inseparable, colleagues. Our Constitution provides one of the most powerful frameworks for human dignity in the world. It guarantees freedom, equality, and justice, but the Constitution itself cannot give life to these values on its own. It depends on people like you in this room today. So the state, as you've heard here numerous times today, carries the responsibility to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights of the Bill of Rights. And then institutions such as our Chapter 9s and a very specific mention, Commissioner, Chapter 10, we carry the responsibility to monitor, investigate, and hold power accountable when those obligations are not met. But the Constitution also quietly places responsibility on each of us and you individually. So that responsibility is particularly for me meaningful in places like this, at the University of Fort Hare. This university, as we've mentioned, has produced leaders who shaped political and moral direction of South Africa and on the continent. They did not simply inherit rights, they carried responsibility for the future of societies. So today's students, you, stand in that same tradition, the responsibility to think critically, the responsibility to challenge injustice, the responsibility to protest with purpose, responsibility, and integrity, and the responsibility to safeguard the democratic institutions that generations before you fought for so hard to build. So human rights are not sustained by laws alone. They are sustained by citizens who understand that freedom requires vigilance, courage, and responsibility. So the question that remains for your generation is simple. What will you do with the rights that you are inheriting? Before we close, I would like to extend sincere appreciation to everyone who made this lecture possible today. We thank again the University of Fort Hare for hosting this important annual human rights lecture and for continuing its proud tradition of intellectual leadership and social justice. We thank the students, academics, and members of the university community for joining this important conversation. Our partners, brothers and sisters on the stage who assist us and give us muscle to do the jobs that we very vigilantly want to be doing every day. And then also to the chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission in absentia here, Mr. Chris Nissen, for sharing his reflections today with us and for his continued commitment to advancing human dignity, equality, and justice in South Africa. Thank you, everyone, for your presence today and the engagement. Outside, refreshments will be served. Thank you so much.
Just a quick note on the refreshments. I will ask the students to remain seated, and then I'll ask our guests and colleagues to make their way downstairs, please.